It's about that time again for another episode of Northern Colorado's only region-specific podcast. Whew. Here we go. Welcome to the More You NoCo, a podcast I want you to know all about, because my hope is that you'll enjoy each episode. But also, after hearing more and more of the show, I hope that Northern Colorado begins to feel just a bit more connected, and it makes your life better, even if it's just a little bit. So try out other episodes. You never know who or what you may find. I was not ready for today's guest. Chalice Springfield is the CEO of Sears Real Estate, located in Western Greeley. She had insights about the real estate world I had never even considered. And little did I know, before I started this episode, that Chalice knows many of the people that have already been on the show. So without delay, I bring you Chalice Springfield.
You might get some really good stuff out of that.
All right, so it's Chalice, right?
Chalice, like Alice with CH in the front.
Yeah,
Chalice.
Well, like a chalice.
Like a chalice, exactly.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was like Chalice.
That's the French pronunciation.
Oh,
not
okay.
really. I mean, I'm just teasing. I don't know if that really is.
Yeah.
Sounds that way.
Maybe. Yeah, it's like people say Ivan or Ivan.
Ivan.
Yeah.
That's like the German pronunciation,
right? Or Russian. Or
Russian,
Spanish.
Right.
Yeah.
Ivan.
So, just depends on who you're talking to, I guess.
Ivan is a very strong name.
Thank you.
Don't you think?
I guess.
I think it sounds very strong.
It's my name, so that's all I know.
Did you make it up? I mean, did you name yourself? Like, some people have renamed themselves, like,
This is
nickname.
interesting. I have had a legal name change, but it was not my first name.
Oh, got it.
I was sitting here thinking, how could I be in the womb and name myself and knock on my mom's stomach and say, yeah, Mom, I'd really like this name, Ivan.
My best friend changed her for her first name later in life because she didn't want to have sort of the history that she had with that name.
So that's kind of what.
So that's what I was thinking. Like, well, maybe.
Yeah, that's kind of what led me to change my middle and last name.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. All right, so I sit
enough
here.
About you.
What?
We could just turn it on you. So I'm a good interviewer.
You could. Yeah, this is a conversation.
Excellent.
So I sit here with Chalice Springfield, the CEO of Sears Real Estate. Thank you for ending your week with me here on a late Friday afternoon.
Thank you, Ivan.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, this is exciting.
And our millions of listeners who just can't wait. They've been beckoning and they've been just cheering for Chalice.
After they hear this podcast, you're going to get way more listeners.
Yeah, I mean,
up on the leaderboard.
People will, when they give a TED Talk in the future, they'll turn around and say, this was the moment.
This is it.
Yeah. So, let's start. You are here at Sears Real Estate. For the folks at home who may not know about you, what is that?
So, Sears Real Estate is based in Greeley, Colorado, which is in northern Colorado, of course, because that's your podcast, right? It's hello, that's the theme. Well, we're, I think, primarily in the Weld County area. That's our, I would say, strongest foothold. We do sell real estate anywhere up and down the entire Front Range. So anywhere from Denver to Fort Collins. We sell a significant amount of business in Loveland, Fort Collins. We are a residential real estate firm made up of about 50 real estate agents and about 10 staff members. So I supervise, or I call it herding cats, about 60 of them, 60 cats here on a daily basis.
What brought you here to Sears Real Estate?
It is a really fun story, actually. When I was 19, I transferred to the University of Northern Colorado from a small college in Sterling, Kansas. I grew up in Colorado Springs, and I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So via Sterling, Kansas, very small town, came to UNC because of their teaching program. So when I transferred here, I was 19. I had to put myself through college, and I was looking for a job. And this is how old I am, Ivan, right? There wasn't anything online. We had little index cards.
What does that mean?
Right? Just means I'm kind of old, and they didn't have computers that announced jobs, and you couldn't search the internet for it. I had to go physically up to the financial aid office, and they posted all of the jobs on little index cards. And so I answered a job for Sears. It was actually called Sears and Company, the team, this firm, to work in their mailroom when I was 19.
As a student?
As a student. And so I put labels on, I answered phones, I did that part-time while I went to school full-time. Pretty soon the job turned into a full-time job, and I also went to school full-time. They, within about a year, paid for me to get my real estate license. So I drove back and forth to Denver on my college summer break, got my real estate license, and not really to sell real estate. They were really looking more from a management perspective and the knowledge that you get from a real estate license. So I did that, and worked for the final 2 years of school, going to school full-time and working in real estate full-time. And then I graduated and they offered me a job. I stayed in that position as office manager, doing administrative work for about, 3 or 4 years. Then just wanted to try something different, got a little burned out. I was helping 2 agents as well. And then I worked at a title company, worked there for 7 years, came back and sold real estate here with my business partner, Press Montoya. And then got tired of not seeing my husband, working evenings and weekends, left and went and worked in a mortgage company. And 13 years ago, they called me and said, our managing broker's leaving. Would you come back? And so this is my 3rd time back, but I started in the mailroom and now I get to run the company. So it's really kind of a cool story, and I have a special place in my heart for Sears because I've done pretty much every single job here.
Yeah, you bounce back and forth. Because typically, when you started up this grand tale, I thought it was going to be like a linear rise to the ranks. But no, you left, you came back.
Right. Called me 13 years ago and said, hey, our managing broker is leaving. We think you'd be a great fit. Would you come back and lead the company? And so I think the benefit for me was that I got to see some other types of businesses in this industry, like title insurance. I sold real estate, so that's helpful in my job now. And also worked in mortgage lending. And so that amalgamation of everything has really helped me in my position here.
So, grew up in the Springs, but ended up in Kansas. You said you wanted to be a teacher, and yet you weren't already going to UNC. It's a curious set of situations. Because I feel like today somewhat, but more so in the past, UNC had a real huge reputation for teaching.
Absolutely. It is what drew me back. I think, when you grow up in Colorado and you are graduating from high school, sometimes I think people just want to spread their wings and fly. Right. And so it was intriguing to me to go to a different state. To the school that I did go to was much smaller than UNC, a small private school. And that experience was good, but almost too small for me. I mean, the entire town had one stoplight in the entire town. I remember driving through and thinking that we missed the business district. Where's the McDonald's? Where's the, it's like, this is it. This is all we have. So transferring back to UNC was partially due to the small nature of that school and because UNC really did have a great teaching program. And even though I didn't pursue my career in education, I feel like I teach big people now.
You still ended up teaching?
I did. I also, in addition to being the CEO here at Sears Real Estate, I have a coaching and training business that I do talks and motivational speaking engagements and things like that in the community for the SBDC and for just on my own. That's kind of what I do for fun.
And in your career, have you worked outside of a market other than Greeley?
I would say...
Or I didn't know how far Sears Real Estate spreads.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I guess that should be a precursor.
Right. That's probably a better question. Sears Real Estate was started in 1972 by Doug Sears, which is how we got our name, Sears Real Estate. Just a family name, which is really well known in northern Colorado. And that's the only place that we are, is northern Colorado.
Okay.
When Sears and Roebuck was in business, the department store, people often confused us for Sears and Roebuck. In fact, one of my agents came down the other day and said somebody called her recently on what we call a floor call, just an incoming call, and said, do you have real estate that we could buy in California? And she's like, confused. No, we don't sell property in California, only in Colorado. And it ended up being somebody that was looking for a defunct Sears and Roebuck department store. But we're not affiliated. Just the family name Sears, Doug Sears, is how we got our name.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sears is still around, right? I mean, I feel like that's a ship that is slowly sinking.
They actually did just declare bankruptcy. So this year it was sort of the fall of the empire for Sears and Roebuck. But we have gotten a lot of calls in my time here for 25 years in real estate for chainsaws and dishwashers here at Sears Real Estate. So.
Maybe you should have bought some.
Maybe we should have. It's probably helped our SEO, I'm just saying.
You could have had a second side business.
We should have, yeah. That's a good idea.
So how has the market in northern Colorado been interesting?
The interesting thing is when I first started in this business 25 years ago, when I was 19, I think the northern Colorado area was somewhat segmented. So people that sold real estate in Greeley or people that sold real estate in Loveland were fairly segmented. If you sold real estate in Loveland, you didn't come over to Greeley to sell real estate. That's not true now. really the growth of northern Colorado has created more of, I would say, a regional market, which goes anywhere from Denver/Longmont all the way up north to Fort Collins, Wellington. So we have plenty of knowledge about the Fort Collins and Loveland areas. It's almost really a tri-city area, Loveland, Fort Collins, Greeley. But they're very different. The three areas have different feel and different flavor, as you would expect. And the market is pretty healthy right now. Northern Colorado is experiencing huge job growth. And because of that, jobs are a leading indicator for real estate. Because of that, I think the real estate market has been very positive. I think the other thing is, at one time we did have a Windsor physical branch location, and it's interesting to have multiple branches. Not that we're opposed to it. We don't have another branch right now. We have one physical bricks and mortar location here in Greeley, even though our agents spread out and sell in a wide area in northern Colorado. But when you think about culture and how to impact people and the relationships that get created in a physical space, I think there's a difference sometimes between one location and another. So when you have a Fort Collins location and a Greeley location, there's different cultures based on the leaders and the managers in those cultures. There might be an overriding vision, mission statement, those kinds of things. But you can get different flavors, and sometimes that can be hard to manage.
It ends up like a Venn diagram, where you have some overlap, but the circles are largely very different, and people's experience coming into work at two different branches may be different. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something you all are intentionally avoiding. You like this one home base, everyone's here, and you can more control that vibe. Yeah,
I mean, culture is really important to us. We really want to make sure, I kind of describe it as a pot of chili. That, we have lots of different ingredients in the pot of chili, all those cats that we're hurting. Right. So, but if you have bad ingredients in a pot of chili, just one bad ingredient, one lemon, can ruin an entire pot of chili. But chili's got a lot of different ingredients. And so, when you think about that, I think culture and that pot of chili is one of the key things to be paying attention to, not just in the real estate business, but in any environment that you want to be working in.
Would you say in your time here at Sears that you've noticed any market-specific challenges or things that have kind of come back time and time again for you all?
Absolutely. When I started my job here in 2006, the market was just getting ready to go into the recession. Take this job, so excited, and the market tanks.
Oh, when they called you.
Well, right after that, yeah.
CEO.
Right. So 2005 was really the sort of the peak before we hit in the recession. We really didn't come out of the peak until about 6 or 7 years ago. Not the peak, but through the recession. Mm-hmm. What I would say is that you can count on all real estate /financial /markets in general is there will be ups and there will be downs. But one thing I love about real estate is everybody always needs housing. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the three, food, shelter, and clothing. Now, whether they need $1 million house or they need a $100,000 house could be a different argument. But ultimately, housing is something that's a commodity that people typically are going to be in need of.
Yeah. Have you all seen prices rising on average here in Colorado with the influx?
Yes.
Because I certainly have seen a change in my rent over the 4.5 years I've been here.
I know. I'm so sorry.
And that's just demand, right? It's just influx of people, and so there's more people bidding for the same house, and then the seller knows, we can bump this up.
Exactly. The low that we hit for the median sales price for residential sales was $130,000. You could buy a house in the recession for $130,000. I wish I would have bought like 10 of them. I didn't have all the liquidity to do that, but $130,000. Today, our median sales price in Greeley Evans, about 7 or 8 years later, is $306,000. It's almost tripled. So, and I would say in northern Colorado, Weld County was hit the hardest for recession, foreclosures and short sales and what we call distressed property. So I think comparing Weld County, we really hit low, rock bottom, if you will, at that 130. But northern Colorado in general has seen prices increase like you're talking about, Ivan, and it's absolutely supply and demand. So we have lots of people coming to the northern Colorado area, both for jobs, quality of life. People like to live here, love the mountains, love hiking, etc. And so they move here, which drives up demand. And if people don't put their houses on the market to sell, we have very little supply. So in the last 3 years, I would say 3 to 5, we've had decreasing active inventory, meaning houses to sell, which puts more and more upward pressure on pricing.
See, I'd always thought about the influx of population and the rising demand, but what I hadn't considered is a lower supply because people have just now nabbed a home and they're not moving because they made it to Colorado where they wanted. They tried so hard to be here. Or they see the prices skyrocketing and they remember back in 2009 when they bought their house and they're saying, there's no way we're leaving now.
Right. Or maybe they can't, maybe prices have skyrocketed so much that what they can get for $250 now, if they sell their house for $250, now they have to buy up. If it's a move up to $350, they may not be able to afford it, or that same house may not really be much better than the house they're in at $250. So it's a challenge. This has probably been the last few years, almost even more of a challenging market than the foreclosure market that we were in because of the supply and demand conversation.
Just managing that interplay between people who are trying to sell and buy, and you're trying to make both sides happy and
having a lot of buyers. Like on average, normally Greeley Evans would have, in a normal kind of balanced market, about 900 homes on the market for sale. And at the end of October, we had 294. Wow. And that's not fully active. Some of those are under contract accepting a backup offer. So I'd say it's probably closer to 200 to 215. So think about that like an analogy. If you were buying bread at Walmart or King Soopers. So you go to buy bread at King Soopers. There's lots of varieties. There's some price competition. You can get the lowest price of bread at 99 cents and the highest price bread at $5.90. I don't know. When you think about when there's not much supply, right, and you go buy bread at 7-Eleven, you have maybe one choice. And it's pretty premium. Might still be the middle of the road bread, but you're paying $3 or $4 for it.
The unit price is higher.
Right, exactly. So that's sort of what we've been in is 7-Eleven pricing versus kind of having a lot of inventory available, a lot of choices, which puts that more moderate pressure on pricing.
It baffles me that I showed up here to talk to the CEO of a real estate company, and I hadn't even considered thinking about asking the 2008 real estate crisis and the bubble. And all of that and the market and your experience with that.
Yeah, it was really hard. I mean, delivering news, when I first started this job in 2006, to have to train agents to deliver news about people losing their house, not being able to make their payments, and sometimes for really legitimate reasons, like, maybe they lost their job or they had a medical bankruptcy or those kinds of things. So oftentimes I think people think, oh, they're just a bunch of people that didn't want to make their house payment. We found a lot of situations where it was just a hardship. And so it couldn't continue to make their payment and then lose your house and what that created. And there was just a really emotional time for people. And so managing that, both for the news that my agents had to deliver, but also trying to figure that whole process out, it was a challenge.
So when these homes foreclose, they go to the bank. So it's no longer your responsibility, right? Or where do you pick up on that property again?
You, the buyer, or you, you, the seller, or the real estate company?
The real estate company. You're all's...
Yeah, so the seller, if they lose their property through foreclosure, they could sometimes sell it prior to the foreclosure sale. In the state of Colorado, that's called a public trustee sale. So they could do it before the public trustee sale in what's called a short sale. So they are still the owner of the property, and the bank then takes a shortage on the payoff because they're underwater. If the client the seller does not manage to sell or get a short sale approved before the trustee's sale, then you're right, the bank usually takes that back over, and the public trustee then returns the property back to the bank. We would get involved in two ways. First of all, on the short sale side, but second of all, on the back end, if the bank took it over, banks would then list with companies like Sears Real Estate to help them sell it because they didn't want a bunch of inventory. So Wells Fargo forecloses on 50 homes in Greeley. There's probably more than that. If they foreclosed on those, they don't have a reason to have 50 homes that they now want to manage property in Greeley, Colorado for.
So then they call you up and ask you to help sell those.
That's correct.
And what did that process look like? You had these agents that you had to counsel and train through getting families through a really tough time of losing their home. And then you turn around and you're given that exact same home. And then now it's your job to sell it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Yeah. I think the thing about working with banks was it's fairly clinical. right? They're all about the numbers. So, how to get the most money out of the property. Very much more emotional on the seller side. That's their primary residence and they're losing their house, and for whatever reason or whatever circumstance, once it had gone to the bank, a lot more red tape, a lot more, paperwork, a lot more, more on the financial side probably, making sure that the property didn't have people squatting in it, making sure that people, the condition was somewhat good. Oftentimes banks didn't want to make repairs on properties.
So you sell as is.
Right, sell as is. So that was a difficult situation as well when you're in the real estate negotiation process, and when there were more than 900 homes on the market at that time. I would say real estate, when people often come and want to talk to me about being a real estate agent, I say, so what is attracting you to this business? And oftentimes they'll say, I really like HGTV. And Ivan, HGT has ruined it for us, because the problem is HGTV is just a television show.
Right.
And most of it's not true. Most of it's staged. Most of it's just all wrapped up in 30 minutes. I haven't had any real estate transaction. We haven't had any real estate transaction that looks like HGTV. Truthfully, it's great if you like staging and you like houses and you love watching house hunters, fine. But real estate is really more about the people side. It's more psychology, it's more negotiation, helping buyers and sellers come to the table, figure things out. And so the wrong reason to get into real estate is just if you like houses. Because if you don't like people, it's not going to work for you.
And I feel like this is something that a lot of our listeners may be surprised at as well.
Absolutely.
Where do you begin training people in this interesting, emotional web of buying and selling a home? I just feel like people show up with that interest in real estate, but maybe the emotional component they're not ready for.
Part of it is, I think, transparency. So as a leader of this company, when people call me and say, hi, I just passed my real estate test, I've been taking the classes, and I'm ready to join a firm. Because for 2 years, you have to be under a firm with supervision. And would you hire me? And I say, well, let's back up. It's our first date. Let's talk a minute and tell me a little bit about what you're looking for. What attracted you to real estate? And, so when they say, I just love houses and I love HGTV and I love showings and I love Home Depot and Lowe's. And I say, what do you think about people? So I think it's that transparency to number one, talk to them that the difference between, not even a difference, that real estate is more about the people side, but also that it's an expensive business. Because people get in and it's a fully commissioned sales position and it's an expensive one. On day one, you have to write checks for about $2,000 to $3,000 and you haven't sold a house. And so people think, oh, it's going to just be easy. I'll sell a property and get a commission. Sometimes, and what we tell our new agents is, don't anticipate having a closing for 6 months. So no paycheck for 6 months, and you're shelling money out. But I don't know that people are always told that on the front end from real estate companies.
This is a shock to me. I've never heard about this part of the real estate business.
Right. And I think oftentimes when new agents call, they call other firms or they just call around looking for somebody that will hire a new person. I don't know that people take the time to sit down and really talk to them about the numbers and how much money do you have in savings and can you go through 6 months worth of savings making your rent or house payment, and do you have kiddos at home? What does that look like without having a paycheck? So I'm committed to that. And oftentimes it sounds like bad news when I tell people.
But you're just being honest. You want them to know what they're walking into.
And it doesn't set them up for success if we don't tell them the truth about it. Now all of a sudden they've started a job in which they have no income and, a lot of expenses. And all it does is create worry and stress for them. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to feed my kids?
Right. Do real estate agents follow the buyers of houses or the sellers?
Both. So typically the seller in the state of Colorado, it's just sort of been custom, but it's not 100% of the time. It's a negotiable item. Typically the seller is the one who pays the commission on behalf of the listing agent who would represent the seller, but also the selling agent who represents the buyer. So
there's two different agents.
There could be two different agents. It could be the same person, but probably 80 to 90% of the time it's two different people. So we cooperate. That's the other unique part about this kind of a business is our competitors are also our cooperators. And we do that through something called the MLS, the Multiple Listing Service. In the MLS, we put our listings in there and anybody that belongs to the MLS, other real estate agents at other companies can access that information, and we have an agreement that we can show each other's properties.
Okay. So in this market, what would keep me as a real estate agent from just choosing to find sellers?
You totally could.
Right. Because you had mentioned that it's a hard market, but I guess maybe I'm not going to be the only real estate agent out there thinking that.
Right. It's very competitive. And if, like we talked about earlier in the show, if people don't want to sell their property and you're just only focused on sellers, you may not have any business. Right? If sellers keep telling you, no, I don't want to sell. I don't want to move. I don't have the money to move up. I remember that foreclosure process, whatever. If you don't have any sellers and you've only restricted yourself to sellers, now you may not really have a commission ever. So people tend to work both sides. They work both with sellers and with buyers.
Okay, that's interesting. And they're all just picking their own plate, I assume. I'm going to grab some buyers, some sellers, and depends on what comes up and what I hear about. And
yeah, and who they know. Really, it's the relational piece of the real estate industry. Who do you know? What are the connections you've made? It's one of our core values is being involved in the community. We are really involved because we believe that when you know your community, it helps you make connections with people and that you're of service to them. Those community connections help us with the relational piece that then helps us sell or buy, either one.
How has this world changed since you stepped into the mailroom? How do things look different?
Let me see if I can think of two examples. The first example that we sort of tease about is that the multiple listing service, the one I was talking to you about where we all put our listings in and share with RE/MAX or share with Realty One or share with whoever, that all used to come in a printed book on a weekly basis. So it was literally like a catalog, like a Sears and Roebuck catalog. And they would print it every single week. Everybody would get a printout, and then we would have to go and give updates at a weekly meeting held at the local board of realtors. So you'd say, page 3, upper right, under contract. Page 14, middle right, price reduced to $295. So really no computers at that time. When I got started when I was 19, we had one of the very first fax machines, and we thought we were pretty groovy. It had curly paper, and if the curly paper sat out in the sun, it turned all black. It was a heat thermal fax machine.
What?
Right?
What is curly paper?
It just was on a roll, but it wasn't like what we experience today, which is just regular printer paper. It came and it would just curl once it came off the machine. So you'd have to kind of lay it out and straighten it and figure out how to read it because it would curl up. That's one example, because today everything is just totally computerized. It's instant. I mean, we would be horrified if we had to go to a meeting once a week to get updated about price reductions or under contracts. And I can't imagine how we would even do this market doing something like that with multiple offers and things going under contract in an hour. How would you do that?
The house buying and selling market must have been 3 times as slow back then.
Yeah. And I guess maybe people were just used to that. They were just used to sort of handwriting offers. We still had typewriters, wrote on NCR, no carbon required paper. Computers and technology have certainly been a game changer in this industry.
Were you here at Sears when MLS launched?
No. So MLS has been around for a long time. Our local MLS, which is called IRIS, Information Real Estate Services, started in 1995. So I was here. But there was a previous MLS that IRIS replaced, which was called Tri-City Services.
So you were here when you all got the Holy Grail.
Yeah, when the computers, I can remember when we could see the computers. And it was like, and there's been versions of it, right? It's not just like all of a sudden we have the same version that we do today. Right. But, it's been interesting.
But at some point, that last meeting was held.
Yeah. And people, seriously, you'd think that you'd just taken away their blanket.
And, was it coming to that point? Like, people just felt like, what? We have these computers. Why are we going to these weekly meetings?
Why do we print these books still? People say, I still want the book. And for a while, there was both. There was both, because you had to kind of transition. And some of the old timers, and the book, and the new timers like, hey, the book, why would we print the book, and after a while there were so few people getting a book any longer that they couldn't even make sense. It wouldn't even make sense financially to print the books any longer,
and everything would be late.
Yes.
I'm
so
gonna
out of
sit
date
here and wait for the book, and all my coworkers are already 5 days ahead of me because they've been updating, and I've already responded to that one, and you didn't even know it changed to this, and
that's right.
Come on.
Right. But we still have people tease about the book. There's still people in my office that I have several agents who were in the business even as long as I've been, which is 25 years, that remember the book. And we tease about it. We would never think about, for heaven forbid, going back to the book. I actually have books that we kept just as for fun and games to show people this is how it was done.
What was the second piece you were going to mention that has changed?
Well,
if you haven't forgot.
I do think that technology has been good from that particular perspective. I think it's made it easier for agents to get information quickly and disseminate information and share it. I think one of the challenges is that websites and national portals like Zillow and Realtor.com and things like that have made people a little bit desensitized to the relationship piece still with their agent. So you just get online, you look up 123 Main Street, and you just call whoever pops up. And the challenge with that is that may not be the best person to represent you. And not just because they're not the listing agent, but maybe because they don't know the area. You know, we have a lot of people that come from outside of our area that I don't know if they have what we call geographical competence. Do they know Greeley or Fort Collins well enough to know about the zoning issues? Or to know about that we have a program called G-Hope, which is a grant program for people that work at the university that they can get a grant to help them buy housing in the area. When you just pick because it's a name that pops up and it's convenient, it's okay, but you may not be getting the best representation that you deserve.
I've never bought a house.
Yeah.
And this is something
we can help you with that. I'm just saying.
I've walked into the right place.
Exactly.
Maybe another time.
I'll show you a book. I'll show you an old book, Ivan. It's good.
Dust it off.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. What if I sent someone to you on, let's say, 2 months into your job here in the mailroom.
Yeah.
And that person told you, Chalice, someday you'll be the CEO of this company. What would you say?
I don't know that I would have believed it. I mean, at 2 months in, right? Here's the thing, Ivan. How many little kids grow up, probably more now these days, but I never grew up thinking real estate was actually a viable profession. And it's been my entire career. Now, in the big wide world of an ocean of real estate, I've done mortgage, and I've done title, and I've done management, and I've done sales. So I've done a lot of things in that big wide ocean of real estate. But if you'd asked me when I was 19 years old, is this going to be the trajectory that you're on for the rest of your life? I don't know that I would have thought that I would. I thought I'm going to be an elementary education teacher. And now, 25 years later, I just tell you I get to teach big people.
Yeah. But that second time you came back, you must have had some sort of feeling like, oh, I kind of belong here. Or even in the mailroom, you must have seen and talked to real estate agents who were making a living and they loved it and they enjoyed it. And, you know, it's like you were in that environment already.
I think one of the things I do love the most about real estate is, well, first of all, it's a career in private business. The amount of work that you put in often equates the amount that you get out. And I like that. That's not always true when you're at a, XYZ job with number 1, 2, 3, 4, or you don't have tenure at a university, or you're working in a nonprofit and they just, the pay is not commensurate necessarily, or it might be, but it may not be, with the amount of work that you put in. And so that's the first thing. But secondly, it really offers a pretty across-the-board fair opportunity to anybody that wants to do it. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, women weren't necessarily making six-figure incomes. That was not necessarily, even 30 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. I know when I came to work at Sears, there were women that were highly successful, that were incredible role models for me, and not just from a financial standpoint, but real career professional women that I didn't necessarily always see in the big wide world. And I still struggle with a little bit, the glass ceiling. Yeah. Oftentimes, I'm the only female CEO at the table when I go to business meetings. It's getting better. I appreciate that, but we still have a little ways to go. Yeah. So real estate's been an opportunity, I think, for people who are young, for people who are old, that this is their second career, not older maybe. This is a second career for them to continue to make a positive income based on the amount of time and effort that they put in.
So were you saying that back in the mailroom you were noticing that the proportion and the representation of women was higher in real estate than other places?
Yes. It wasn't necessarily 50-50 or but it was high. I mean, I would say at Sears, I can remember some true icons, that Jackie Calhoun was one of them, and Mary Lou Wisnand, and just some people who had a mastery of this business and were really good role models from that standpoint, who were full-time career people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
Well, thank you for your time, Chalice.
Ivan, thank you. What an opportunity.
It's been a pleasure.
Go in my gratitude journal. I got to do a podcast with you.
There it is.
Thank you.
Do you also enjoy the music used here at the More You NoCo? I want to shout out my good friend Russell Isaac Long for always giving us those hot fire tracks. Are you looking for a little bit of bonus content in addition to the episodes of the More You NoCo? Check us out on Facebook or Instagram at the More You NoCo. Original, right? Don't worry, we'll be back soon. Until next time, peace!